Today, I am honored to have the extraordinary educational consultant with me again, Saleena Agyei. As the academic year has begun, she has come back to give her views on the educational system in the UK. Having 15 years of teaching experience, I know she will inspire us all with the truth and honesty. Hand on heart, I am really looking forward to this.
Wow, that's quite an introduction. I'm not that great, I just figured children out. It's not that hard.
Assalamualaikum, Saleena. Are you ready to give us extraordinary perspectives on the education system?
I am. I'm probably going to get in trouble like I always do, but that's fine.
Okay, just to give the viewers an idea of your role in teaching, can you please explain to us what an educational consultant is, and can you please recall one special moment that you changed a child's life in your 15-year career?
Oh, there have been so many moments. We call them the eureka moments. So yes, well, 15 going on, well, it's probably nearer 17 now, years in education. I don't really like the term consultant, but it's easy for people to understand. Unlike most consultants, what I do is I go in and I teach with the teachers and I look at their books and then I look at how they're teaching, which I think most consultants do, but what I do is give them the problem. When I was a teacher, the problem I found was that you were given so much theory and not practical examples of what good teaching looked like. It is changing, but certainly that was my experience. So when I go into the classroom and a teacher has to teach the times tables, or they have an actual objective and they don't know how to break it down, what I'm really good at is working backwards. I'm really good at figuring out what it's like to be in the mind of a 4-year-old, or the mind of a 6-year-old, or the mind of a 10-year-old. I'm really good at that. My dad comes from a huge family, and my mum has a quite large family. My dad he's one of 21 brothers and sisters. So I've got well over 200 cousins. So children and me were always together. Yeah, there was children everywhere. Children coming out of our ears. And so and whenever there was parties, the kids always were with me. Like, maybe I'm the goofball, but I don't know. But I'm the one who would be the entertainer, or I'm the one who'd do the homework, or I would be the one who'd have sleepovers. And in all honesty, I actually enjoy the company of children, a bit like Michael Jackson, sometimes more than the company of adults, because they just kind of tell you what they think, and sometimes they follow what I call the KISS theory, which is keep it simple, stupid. So they don't overcomplicate anything. And very often if I'm having an issue and I just tell my niece, oh, this has happened, she'd be like, well, why don't you just do this? And I'd be like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? And so I love the simplicity of being around kids, and I hate the fact that life is complicating them. So, right, a moment that really changed. Oh my goodness. I think I taught a little boy called Carlos de Santos, who was partially deaf, and between me and the head teacher we were able to help him read, which is amazing because he was partially deaf. But there was this one class that I used to teach, I think 4 years into my teaching career, and they were a collection of the world's most challenging children. I'm talking about inner estate boys, didn't care about anything, wanted to grow up and just their aspirations were to be gangsters and earn lots of money. And it wasn't like a 5-minute aspiration. From the time they were in reception to the time they were with me in year 4, they had the same aspiration. I'm just going to be a gangster, miss, it's easier. And I was the only teacher in that school who gained their respect, in the sense that if I took the authoritarian mode with them, they'd actually stop and listen. But that's because I spent a huge amount of time talking to them, getting to know them, calling them on the rubbish they used to do, telling them about what a mortgage is, why you need it, why you need to work, going to Tesco's and having a budget. I just really told them that you're not going to stay 10 forever. You are going to move on, and your parents are going to expect you to move on. They will not have you in their house forever. You've got to earn a living. And, you know, the problem is with gangster life, you want to go for it, but you'll probably live all of 5 years. And what a waste of time that would be when you can live so much longer. So I think that group of boys, unfortunately, I learnt the other day that a couple of them have still gone down that route and they haven't done very well for themselves. But a couple of them have done well for themselves, and I guess I had a hand in that. So, yeah, my job is for every child in my care to realise their potential, whether it's driving a BMW or being an office manager or being the new co-founder of the latest slime, I don't know. Whatever it is that they want to do, I want to help them get there.
When explaining your teaching approach to the Islam channel viewers, you stated that one of your students told you teach me out of annoyance. I found this hilarious. Can you please give us 2 methods on how you approach youngsters as a teacher?
I annoy them. I'm a bit of a joke. First of all, when you've got a classroom, you can't be their friend at first. You've got to establish mutual respect and that I'm the teacher, so what I say goes. But once we've established that you respect that, I will listen to you all the livelong day. So I privately teach. A few parents commission me to privately teach. I don't do that. I don't call it tutoring because these children have been with me for years. So I am privately teaching them and guiding them through their GCSEs and A-levels. And they've been with me since their SATs, so before their SATs. So there's this one little boy, and I'm going to embarrass him and call him Ben because that's the name. So Ben, and Ben said to me, you literally annoy me until I learn. And that's because I will, when he asks me a question, I'll ask him a question back. And he'll ask me another question, and I'll ask him a question back to the point where he finds the answer on his own. But it's taken us an hour, but he will never forget that answer. If I just tell him 1 + 1 = 2, he'll be like, okay, but he might not remember it. So what I do is I create a strong neurological pathway by basically boring him and annoying him, and then he's like, oh, I've learnt this, and I remembered it. Why? Because like the other day he didn't know what timid meant, and I just refused, and I took him around all the emotion known to mankind, every single emotion, until he found timid. And then 3 months later I said to me, Ben, what does timid mean? And he went, how can I forget it's when you're shy? Because you basically took 3 hours for me to find the answer. But you know what, he didn't forget it. And so I've given him, so I like annoying my children, I like poking fun at them. And likewise, they do the same with me. So we have a great mutual relationship. Otherwise, life is too boring to just teach and be passive.
Okay, without any further delay, I would like to discuss the educational schooling system, which is a really close matter to your heart. We can clearly see how passionate you are in educating youngsters. In an episode of Women's AM you stated, there is so much pressure on teachers to teach and convey information, because at the end of the year students have to know XYZ. You added it's an absolute joke. Personally, I find this worrying because we have a population that is growing constantly, and my mind wonders what kind of future will the next generation have. So, Saleena, could you give us at least 3 ways the government could improve education in the UK from your perspective?
That's a really mean question. I tell you what, I'll go one better. If I could create my own school, this is what I'd do. First of all, a lot of parents come up to me and they say to me, should I send my child to an outstanding school? And my answer 9 times out of 10 is no. I send my children to a school that's consistently good, because for me, consistently good is outstanding. Why? Because it means parents have good relationship with the school, children are having a good time at school and they're learning consistently well, but most importantly, teachers are not dropping like flies because there's so much pressure for them to prove they're outstanding rather than just be consistently good. I have seen teachers become so ill because they are under so much, huge amounts of pressure. Whereas if you're in a school that's consistently good, it means that the management is in place and secure. They respect the staff are in place and secure. You don't have huge amounts of staff turnover or staff sickness and leave. It means that staff are leaving at an appropriate hour for a human being to function, 5 o'clock. You've been at work since 7 in the morning. Most teachers get to work between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. You've got there at that time. You should be leaving between 4 and 5 o'clock, because guess what? It's okay for you to go to the cinema. It's okay for you to go to dinner with your best friend. It's okay for you to look after your family and cook your own dinner and not run ragged. It's okay for you to do that and be an excellent teacher. So I would say the government need to increase the amount of time. If you're going to increase the expectation and the workload, then you need to increase the amount of time teachers have outside the classroom. So we have specialist teachers now. So how about you give the government are always moaning about there's lack of PE. How about you give your children an hour, a day and a half PE with a specialist teacher, and you give your teachers a day and a half out of the classroom? If you did that, not only would all the workload get done in the correct amount of time, which is directed time, they would also take less time off work, and then you would spend less money on supply teachers, having to replace those teachers that are off work. They could also then study more about teaching in their time off. They would have more career development opportunities. They would have time to read books. Because contrary to belief, a lot of people come up to me and they say, oh, school finishes at 3:30. Children finish at 3:30. Teachers do not. When I was teaching, from the time I started to the day I left my full-time teaching career, I was at school by 6 a.m. I left school at 6 p.m. I went home, I cooked and cleaned and looked after my children for 2 hours, and then at 8 p.m. my husband would put them to bed, and then between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. I would be working and planning. And I did that consistently for 13, 14 years, having 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. And it made me very sick. But I'm really sorry, as much as the profession is a worthwhile profession, it's not worth me losing the one life that I've got over it, because my children also need me. To the teaching profession, I'm one of many, but to my family, I'm only one. So I would say to teachers, put pressure on your government. If they're going to give you a higher workload, they need to give you more time out of class. More time out of class for teachers, because workload has gone up. So that's number one. Number two, when you make your decisions when it comes to education, please stop going to panelists and experts who haven't been in the classroom for the last 20 years. How about you go and interview frontline teachers, and not in posh schools in the middle of London where everything's done for them, where you go to a school in Barking and Dagenham and you shadow. How about a politician shadows a real teacher in Barking and Dagenham for a week and get to know their work schedule, their expectations, their children, the behaviour issues? How about you do that? I would welcome any MP to come and shadow me in a classroom for a week. I'd happily go back into the classroom for a week for that. So they get a real view of what's going on, because each government has its own agenda, and they're so hell-bent on pushing forward that agenda and making their mark on the political sphere that they are changing policies so quickly that teachers are struggling to keep up. Head teachers because head teachers have to filter those changes down to the assistant and deputy heads, who then have to filter the changes down to the frontline staff. And then you wonder why education is so fragmented. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. There are exceptions, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to paint a picture that, oh, woe is us, the schooling system is a disaster. It is on the brink of ruin because of the pressures on teachers. But it's ticking over, and children are learning, and things are progressing. But it can't continue this way. It really, really can't. And we need to turn to, if I'm not mistaken, in Scandinavia, women get 3 years full paid maternity leave. So they have the chance to educate their children in those first 3 years in the home. Take them to the grocery shop. Give them real life skills. We need to look at parenting and putting more of a focus on parents, and stop expecting teachers to be parents as well as teachers, because that's what we're doing at the moment. So we need to make sure teachers have more time. We need to make sure we're not turning to experts who've been out of the field for God knows how long and just rely on books, to surmise what's going on in the classroom. And we need to put more of a focus on parents educating their children rather than teachers educating, because they're with us for 6 hours a day, and they're with the parents the rest of the time. So parents need to be given the skills to educate as well. And if that means 2 years full maternity pay, in the long run, it's going to benefit the economy, because you're producing well-rounded individuals ready for the workplace. But we're not playing the long game, we're playing the short game. And we're, like a bucket with lots of holes, we're sticking our fingers in all of the holes to try to plug up the problem so that the bucket doesn't overfill and we all drown. That's what we're doing at the moment.
Thank you very much for that answer. Your honesty and wisdom is why I admire you so much. In our last interview, we discussed the importance of compassion and empathy. Due to the strain on teachers, we know that it is grueling to give every student the attention and love they need. So Saleena, how important is it for teachers to have a high level of compassion and empathy towards their students?
Oh, it's of the highest importance, especially in primary school. I'll speak, actually, in both. I find that in primary school, we're very lovey-dovey. We're all about empowering the child. We're all about developing the mind and listening. And then they go to secondary school and all that stops.
Yes.
I've spoken to many a teenager.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. This was how I felt since going secondary school. Yes, I agree. Continue.
So primary school, we are building leaders and developing children, and then secondary school, we're spitting out robots and sheep. And is that because, I still haven't quite figured it out, is it because we're preparing children for the workplace in the sense of office work, where they just go and they sit in a cubicle and they do their job 9 to 5, 8 to 5, and they go home? And they come back the next day and they go home. Did you know there's a system called Ignite? And a system called Ignite is basically where you get 45-minute break for your entire working day. You get half an hour for lunch, and then you get a 15-minute comfort break. You get like 5 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. And the embarrassing and degrading thing about this system is that it's linked to all the other computers and your manager's computer. So let's say you went to the toilet to relieve yourself and you took 30 seconds longer than you should have. By the time you walk to your desk, the computer on your manager's desk has flashed red that you were away from your desk for a minute longer than you should have been. So basically everyone on that table has found out you've gone to the toilet. Now, this is a basic human need, and you're degraded. No wonder there's so much depression within the office world and within the corporate world, because they're just caging these animals. They're just caged animals. But I've spoken to a number of CEOs that don't care about your working hours. They set a task and they want the job done. However long or short you take to do that job is down to you, so long as the job gets done. So we need to move away, and I think that's what's happening in secondary schools. They're building and gearing these children to go and work in cubicles and plug them into the matrix, as my husband says. So you lose that feel and that humanity that we work so hard to establish in primary school. You lose it because all of a sudden in secondary school it becomes about the facts, what you know, and not how you're going to use it. Because you're going to be someone else's sheep eventually, so it won't matter, will it? We're just churning out people who memorise facts and don't help create them.
Thank you for that overwhelming answer. Even within my childhood, I always believed that every individual pupil or student should be given the attention and love they deserve. Do you think that if youngsters receive the support they need, then we would have a more tolerant society in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, within Robes Royale, my company, a lot of people phone me and email me, can you consider my child for your next, photography session? And I always say to them, it's first come, first served basis. So we will release the ages we need, and then whoever emails first gets chosen. Because as a company, I don't want to say to children, I like the way you look, we're going to choose you. I don't like the way you look, then sorry, you're not successful. I think that sends what kind of message does that send to the children? So at my last photo shoot, and I've been very naughty, well not been naughty, I've been busy, I really do need to put this up on my website. I had, one of my main models has cerebral palsy. Two of my main models had cerebral palsy. Two of my children had autism, one of them had Down syndrome. And the other children were what I would call average and able. So I had a mixture of children modelling for a clothing company. So I think it's a huge message that you need to send out to society, starting from the time at home and the classroom, that we are all one. We're not going anywhere, so we might as well be inclusive. You're not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. So what are we going to do? Fight this constant battle of you're different and I'm different and you're different, so we can't be together. Oh please, it's one planet. We're all here anyway, so we might as well figure out how to get on. It'd be easier.
Thanks for that amazing answer. On that note, I would like to discuss exclusions in state schools. According to The Guardian, the rate of exclusions in primary and secondary schools have increased to 1,000 between 2016 and 2017. The teaching unions are blaming government cuts. Saleena, put statistics aside, if you were to sit with an excluded pupil or student, what words of motivation would you have for them?
First of all, the exclusions have gone up because the types of exclusions have changed. Some children are excluded for a day, some excluded for 3, some are permanently excluded. So now the exclusion for a day, I agree with, because sometimes if a child is behaving in a way, exclusions are not taken lightly. There would have been a process of interviewing the child, calling parents in, sitting down, psychological analysis. There would have been lots done, and the exclusion of the child, even for a day, would have been the last resort. And that's one thing I can safely say about all schools. They will not take exclusion lightly. But, answering your question, what would I do? You can't just sit with a child and figure it out. I'd probably just talk to him about anything else but the exclusion. What his favourite TV programme is, what his favourite football team is. I'd probably want to know what his favourite foods are, how often he goes to restaurants, how often he gets to go to the park. I'd probably ask him what he's really passionate about, aeroplanes, the underground. The Prophet always says, before you can move on, you have to come to common ground, common terms. And you can only do that if you actually genuinely take an interest in the little human being in front of you. So they might be a child, but they're a developing human. And if you really care about the humanity in us all, then you will take the time to get to know that person. So I would sit and I would just ask him or her about anything but the exclusion. And then from that, you'd have to build a relationship. Because you couldn't possibly spend an hour with someone, talk to them about Man United, and then say, although Man United was a disaster this week, and then say to them, by the way, do you think you can control your anger in the classroom so you might not get excluded? It's like you've got to really, unfortunately with humans, there's no one fix wonder. You've got to build and find out and scratch under the surface, for sure.
Thank you for giving us that awesome advice. On that note, I would like to get your thoughts on further education. As a motivational speaker, I believe it is imperative to guide teenagers in understanding what they want to do as a career. In an article published in The Guardian, Janet Murray quoted, "Pupils are being shortchanged by the new schools-based careers advice." So Saleena, can you please explain to us how schools can guide students in finding their passion and purpose?
I can certainly guide you about the passion and purpose I have in my own children. My husband and I, his name's Bilal, we were talking about what we would do with our own children. So, and with parents, you have this you're kind of caught up in this illusion of prosperity, that you're doing better, so your children have to do even better, so they're even more secure. But this idea of security for me is an illusion, because you could have the most amazing job that's paying you the most amazing wage, and then get into a car accident, and all of a sudden your earning capacity goes meow. So for me, the security thing is an illusion. So in that case, you have to make a decision between happy children and happy adults, or forced pretense. So my husband asked me a question. He said to me, tomorrow, if your son turned around and said, "Mum, I love bin collecting. I love talking to people. I like making sure everyone's homes are tidy. I want to be a bin collector. I love working with other people. I like travelling around on a truck all day long. Mum, I want to be a bin collector." Now, the Saleena 5 years ago would have had a heart attack. Oh my God! All this education, all this struggling and tuition, and you want to be a bin collector? No. The Saleena of today, I would actually say, you know what, Issa? Go ahead, give it a try. If that's what makes you happy, it's not what I would necessarily like for you, but I don't have to live your life, because I will leave you one day and you've got to continue. So who am I to say, don't try it? Because if you don't try it and you try something else and then that makes you miserable, it'll end up being a regret that he'll blame me for. So I would say, go for it. Whatever your passion is, bin collecting, papier-mâché, origami, whatever it is. If you need to have another job to pay the bills while you're developing your passion, do that as well. But go for your passion. So yeah, whatever you want to do, monetize on what your passion, or try to monetize on it. So you might need to take another job to pay the bills whilst you're doing it. But that's okay, because eventually your passion will become it will be your monetization. So if you work hard and you're passionate and you have a strong why, like your reason has to be strong, then I would say always go with your passion. It's hard. It's so much harder than just getting a job at X office and just sitting there for the next 25 years of your life. That's so easy to do. You'll be miserable, but it's easy. So I would say go for your passion. It's harder, but go for it.
Thank you for that amazing answer. Do you therefore think if youngsters had a good understanding of their future career, it would boost their motivation at school?
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're working for your own passions and not what someone else is telling you to be passionate about, the motivation is innate. It will just come. I'm not saying it would work for every single child, because, but isn't that a massive problem that at the age of, when do we get given our options for GCSEs? 14? You're supposed to make a life decision at the age of 14? My nephew's 14. He can't even decide whether he wants chips or burger for dinner, let alone decide what he's going to do when he's 32 years old. So I would say to schools, stop trying to produce these mini robots. Figure out what they're passionate about, and then say to them, right, you're passionate about woodwork. So you could have a career in architecture, in carpentry. You don't necessarily have to go to university and spend £18,000. You could take an apprenticeship and then build your way up. Do you see what I mean? Figure out what they're good at and focus on that. Because if you force a child at 14 to say, well, I'm going to be an engineer. Hello, love. What engineer? What kind of engineer? a car, combustion, aeroplane. It's far too much pressure to expect a 14-year-old to know what they want to do. So always focus on their strengths. Career, the career advice days, they need to just focus on children's strengths and not just advertise jobs because, that's easier.
On that note, I would like to switch our attention to grammar schools and the impact on students. From watching the extraordinary BBC program entitled Grammar Schools, Who Will Get In, we can clearly see the differences between comprehensive and selective schools. I would like to ask, are you a fan of grammar schools in general, and what advantages do you think they have?
I'm in two minds about this because as a parent...
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button.
I'm in two minds about this because as a parent, the only school around my area that is any good is actually a grammar school. So I would prefer my children to go there because of the quality of teacher and the quality of students that they'll be mixing with. However, in saying that, if every school was held up to the not academic standards, but held up to the standards of a grammar school, as in the discipline, the expectation on achievement, not lowering the expectations so that that children don't aspire, that kind of thing, I would quite happily send my child to a bog standard comprehensive secondary school. I do believe my daughter is very academic. She's academically gifted, so I think she would thrive in a grammar school. My son is also academic, but he focuses on engineering, so he wouldn't do well in a grammar school because you have to be good at every subject in a grammar school, whereas in a normal comprehensive, it would be very comfortable for you to be good at something. I also think there's a high level of prestige and snobbery. Sorry, no, a lot of people are not going to like that when it comes to grammar schools. And I don't, but I've heard children say, "Oh, I go to this school. Oh, you go to that school. Oh, poor you." People you've got to go back to our origin. Every single person, whatever their ability, has a purpose in this world. You've got to spend your life figuring out that purpose. So if my purpose directs me towards a bog standard comprehensive, but actually, look at Alan Sugar, one of the most amazingly successful men in the country, in the world, you could argue. He didn't go to school. He worked on a market and built his way up, built his empire upwards. So this whole prestige around education, we've got to cut it out. You just have to focus on what your child is good at. And if at 14 your child's struggling academically, support them so they get through it. But actually, they might then end up being a really great apprentice for an electrician and live quite a happy life because electricians make a decent amount of money. Do you see what I mean? So we need to stop thinking who's better than who and start thinking who's good at what and focus on that.
Thank you for that answer. In the documentary, we see how competitive environments can affect students' mental health. What is your perspective on the immense pressure placed on youngsters to achieve outstanding grades?
I think aspiration is important, and you need to make sure that your child, because children, you do need to motivate them. They're not always going to be, yay, let's go and learn, especially when they're teenagers and the Xbox is more attractive. So children need pushing. But again, as a parent, you need to monitor that pushing, when it's becoming healthy, when it's healthy, when it's not healthy. Children need to strive to get baseline education done and dusted, because we do need basic maths and English, to write a letter to the council when you get a parking ticket, to if you want to start your own business, to look at the accounting. You need that baseline English and maths for sure. When it gets silly is when your child gets, they don't do grades anymore, it's numerical, but gets a certain grade, and then the other child doesn't get a certain grade. Like I said, so The person who maybe got a really low grade at GCSE could end up being the more wealthier. And in fact, every single, because I believe that you've really got to surround yourself with successful people in order to aspire to be like them. And I don't mean academically successful, but every single CEO that I have met who has thousands and hundreds of thousands, even millions in the bank, none of them went through the schooling system. None of them went through the schooling system, but they found something they were good at and they excelled at it. So parents need to find a balance. Support your child's baseline education. If they excel at science, brilliant, push them that way. But if they excel at selling, brilliant, push them that way. I certainly could use a few in my company. So, you know, it's all about cutting out the rubbish. Stop competing, stop pitching child against child. It's not a war. You know, there's no... All of this competition leads to what? Leads to what? We all grow up and get a job of some sort. So it would have all been... All that stress would have been for nout, as they say. So cut it out. Stop it. Don't agree with it.
We have sadly come to the end of the interview. I am sure you have inspired everyone with your approach to education. For those that are struggling in achieving their goals, what final words of motivation can you give them to reach their dreams?
One step at a time. So whenever I have, and I have a huge working week in front of me, with Eid tomorrow as well, I think focus on one thing. Get a whiteboard. Whiteboards are great. Write everything down on that whiteboard and then rub one thing out at a time. Don't focus on too many things because you'll end up doing a bit of that and a bit of this and you'll end up doing it badly. Whereas if you focus on one thing and do it really well, that's one thing you can rub off your list. So take it easy, one thing at a time.
Well, Saleena, what can I say? It has been a real privilege to interview you about education. I have not come across a more philosophical and motivational teacher like you. Believe it or not, I have so many more questions on my mind to ask you about, so I hope you become my regular guest, inshallah. Thank you very much.